Call to order for the Watertown City Council meeting for December 20th of 2021. We will start, with a prayer by a guest today. Jan DeBerg from Watertown Area Community Foundation has consented to lead us in prayer, so please rise.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you for this opportunity. Father, please be with us this afternoon as we are gathered to do the city's business. Help us to be mindful of each other while we are here. Help us to be mindful of those who are not here. Please be with us during this holiest of seasons. Watch out over us, watch out over our families, and those folks who are traveling. All these things we pray in your name. Amen.
Would our Finance Officer, Kristen Babzine, please call the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. Bueller. Danforth. Pauline.
Here.
Paulson. Shetty.
Here.
Tupper. Here. Billhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum established. The chair has two quick changes. One on the consent agenda. We are going to pull item H off of the consent agenda. We'll add it to the end of the regular agenda for tonight. And that was because Councilman Paulson needs to recuse himself from that. And also on the regular agenda, we are pulling item M from the agenda tonight. And with that, for the approval of the consent agenda, the chair will entertain a motion to approve. Made by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Bueller. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Public comment section. Is anyone here to speak to the council on something that is not on the agenda for tonight? I don't see anyone, so we'll move on to the approval of tonight's agenda. Chair will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Made by Councilman Billhauer, seconded by Councilman Shetty. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Our first item tonight is a presentation and acceptance of a 2020 audit. And for this, we will go to an introduction from our Finance Officer, Kristen Babzine.
Thank you, Mayor. Troy Heeb with William Neal is here to present his findings from the 2020 audit. So, Troy.
Thank you. At the conclusion of the audit, we are required to communicate to the governing board certain information related to the audit. And the communication is outlined in the letter that is addressed to both City Council and the Utility Board. And I believe Kristen included one in your board packets. First of all, if you have that in front of you, if not, that's fine. I'm going to talk significant audit matters. The city adopted GASB number 84 during the year dealing with fiduciary activities, which changed the accounting policies, how they handle those. The agency funds, which you see reported in prior years, have been eliminated because of this and have been actually adjustments were made to report them under other funds. So that was something that has changed. We are also required to communicate those accounting estimates that are significant because of the significance to the financial statement, because of the possibility that they will be that the future events affecting them may be different than the actual expected amounts. And these significant estimates are actually dealing with the pension plan, the other post-employment benefit plan, and the landfill closure and post-closure costs. If under the corrected and uncorrected misstatements section of that letter, professional standards require us to accumulate all known and likely misstatements identified during the audit, other than those that are considered trivial, and communicate them to the appropriate level of management. And those attached schedules are those that are some uncorrected misstatements of the financial statement. Now, we have determined, our management has determined that these are immaterial in both individual and in aggregate, so no adjustments were made for them. In addition, none of the misstatements detected as a result of the audit and corrected by management were considered material to the financial statements. Other audit findings and issues section. There were no audit findings or issues that were considered to be significant and relevant and were included in the schedule of current audit findings and question costs, which is included in the comprehensive annual financial report. There were other things, additional matters that we had reported to management in a separate communication that weren't significant enough to be included in the report. Just little things we have found throughout the audit. The schedule of current audit findings and question costs, which is actually page 143 of the comprehensive financial report, actually summarizes our audit findings. Our audit on the financial statements, an unmodified opinion was issued on the financial statements for each opinion unit, which means it was a clean opinion. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies disclosed, and there were no non-compliance, which was material to the financial statement. Since the city received more than $750,000 of federal money this year, we also required to do a single audit and test the compliance requirements applicable to major programs. And the federal award, which was tested as a major program, was the coronavirus relief funds. An unmodified opinion was also issued on the compliance. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, and there were no audit findings that are required to be disclosed under those. The audit report has been approved by the South Dakota Department of Legislative Audit. And any questions? Glenn, any questions?
Any questions, council?
No, I guess you've answered two of them. We're getting clean opinions all the way across the board.
Yes.
And the DLA has approved.
Yes.
Has approved this. I wasn't quite sure. You gave us a summary of adjustments that were not made. Did you have to require any adjustments that we did have to make?
There were some, but none of them were material. Kristen would actually have those. I'll have to tell you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the net result was we got a clean opinion, though.
Yes.
When it's all said and done.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I got in the way of questions. I've got one comment after we take action. I'd like to throw something out for future consideration, but no other questions.
All right, any further questions from the council? All right, thank you very much. We do need a motion to, yeah, we do.
I'll make that motion.
Motion to accept the audit made by Councilman Villauer, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Any comments on that?
Not on the action that we're taking, but I would throw a suggestion out. I sit on a couple different boards that utilizes audit committees. I don't want to underestimate or trivialize the importance of an audit. I've sat on both sides of this conversation over the years. I would like to see us put together an audit committee that could sit down with Troy, whoever else is involved from his staff, and maybe Kristen, and a couple council members that acts as kind of that go-between. If issues do come up, that we're aware of them ahead of time, probably meet prior to the audit commencing. As it's wrapped up, sit down again, because I sit in a couple of these, and they serve a very valuable function. So I'd like to see us consider adopting or going down that road for future audits. I think it is worth considering.
Yes.
All right. Our city
It's
manager,
noted.
Mac.
It's noted. We'll put it together for the next audit.
All right. Any further questions or comments from the council? Hearing none, the motion is to accept the audit and to fine Councilman Tupper donuts for his phone going off. It's a joint motion now. No. Actually, just acceptance of the audit. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Just like to thank Kristen and the finance department for all their help. So, thanks.
Thank you. Item B is an approval of an airport ground lease with Heath Peterson. For more information, we will go to our city attorney, Matt Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. At the last meeting, the council considered and approved a resolution of intent to enter into this ground lease. This one is a bit unique in that there's actually currently a hanger on the space. It's been there 30 plus years, and the most recent owner of the facility was Tim Peterson, who had been subleasing to Heath, and now with that last, I guess I gotta buy donuts too.
We've got lots of donuts coming in the new
First
year.
time that's happened. I apologize. Now the lease will now be directly with Heath Peterson. At the last meeting, there was a question raised by Councilman Shuddy regarding potential inflation and costs that may lead us to want to increase our rent. The lease does have a 2% inflation clause in it, and so every year the per square foot rate goes up by 2%. And so, again, I think from a staff perspective, that's a good compromise for the owner of the facility wanting some long-term certainty since they own the building on which on the land. But for us, it does give us some inflationary protection there. So it is a 25-year lease, renewable for one additional 10-year term.
Thank you very much. I'll open a public hearing now and ask if there's anyone who would like to testify in favor of this item, or if there's any comments that were mailed to us or anything. Anyone in favor? Is there anyone against this item? I'll close the public hearing and open it up for council action for a motion to approve the lease. Made by Councilman Shuddy, seconded by Councilman Danforth. Any questions or comments on this, Councilman? All right. Hearing none, the motion is to approve the airport ground lease with Heath Peterson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item C is an approval of resolution number 21-53, a vacation of a right-of-way known as 3rd Street Northeast. For more information, we'll go to our Community Development Manager, Stacy Bungard.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I was wondering, does it make a difference, Attorney Roby, if I may ask a question, on the order of C and D? Does that matter? Okay. Okay.
No, I think the way it's presented is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because this is essentially setting the stage for vacating right away for the next item here, and I just wanted to make sure that that was appropriate. I'm gonna pull up some graphics here before we get started. Okay. So we are indeed requesting that an 80-foot wide right-of-way known as 3rd Street Northeast be located between Kemp Avenue and the alley south of 1st Avenue Northeast be vacated. It's an 80-foot wide right-of-way, sorry about that, and it does extend to the mid-block alley south of 1st Avenue Northeast. And the portion of 3rd Street Northeast of the north of the alley will remain to provide access from the alley to 1st Avenue Northeast. So we will have that alley that will remain as a right-of-way connection. And so I'll pull up the graphic here. Might make a little more sense. Okay, so this is the alley that we're talking about here, the 20-foot wide. And as you can see, the city does own land on both sides here. So this would be incorporated then into the downtown park. So this is a better graphic here that gives you a better visual of what's going on. DRT did review this and did not have any negative comments. We were working with WMU and they would like to retain an easement over existing utilities. But other than that, we don't feel that access would be compromised, and the Plan Commission did unanimously recommend approval of, I guess, a recommendation to you all this evening to vacate this portion of right-of-way. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does our city engineer, Justin Peterson, have anything more to add? No? Nope. Okay. Yeah, we have to do open it up for public hearing first. So I'll open a public hearing and ask if there's anyone who wants to testify in favor of this item. Anyone who would like to testify against? Hearing none, now I will take council action before we can, so motion to approve made by Councilman Danforth. Second by Councilman Tupper actually beat you to it. So now we have a motion to approve, and now Councilman Danforth.
Thank you. Can you identify where the utility easement is in relationship to the vacation?
Sure. I believe that it'll be like right kind of through the middle. Let's see here if I... Oh, I might have just tied it up. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's like stuck now. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. It's kind of a big packet, so I think it's having a problem with all the PDFs. To go kind of slow here, it'll tie up again. I apologize. Okay. I'm sorry, it's not wanting to work very well, but I believe that it kind of goes right down the middle of 3rd Street, if I'm not mistaken here. But it would be somewhere within that 80-foot wide right-of-way that we would maintain those. We would have those located and surveyed accordingly. I apologize, this thing is not wanting to load very well.
Councilman Danforth.
Do we know for sure that we aren't building any structure on top of that easement area where any utilities exist today?
We do not believe that there will be any structures built over that. That shall remain free and clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments, Council? Hearing no further questions or comments, the motion is to approve the resolution for the vacation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item D is an award of a bid for the Watertown Foundation Downtown Plaza to Gray Construction in the amount of $2,591,667. For more information on this one, we will go to our engineer, Justin Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Downtown Plaza project was bid on December 9th, and we got three bidders. We are recommending award to Gray Construction, and to include base bid 1, which is the downtown park, base bid 2, which is an alley reconstruct just north of the park, and then including alternates 1 through 5. For a total amount of $2,591,667. I can give a short description of what the alternatives are. So alternative 1 is the market structure, which is in the northwest corner over here. And looks something similar to that. Alternates 2 and 3 are groups of seat walls. And then alternate 4 and 5 are shade canopies. And then alternate 6, which we weren't recommending due to budget constraints, but that's a base system under the synthetic turf that would allow cars to be parked on the turf area. So this area here is the seat walls. This is one set of shade structures, and there's another set here. And then this is synthetic turf.
Just a minute.
In the center.
Justin, I'll ask you to keep that map up, or that up, because there might be questions about some of that. But for a council to discuss this, I do need a motion to award the bid. I don't need them. Yeah, I do. Made by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. All right. Any questions on this? Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I did have some questions. One was answered on the alternates, but I guess I was thinking that alternative 6 would be a good option, because if those shade structures are being utilized by vendors or people setting things up, they're going to want to be able to back up their cars or their vans to unload. I guess it's something that we should consider, at least talk about. And then I do have a question. It does sound like there was one bid thrown out due to incomplete paperwork. Can you talk a little about that?
Yes, there was one bid that was incomplete. Part of the bid came in late, and there were items that were not filled out. And so after consultation with the city attorney, we've recommend to throw that bid out and award to Gray.
City Manager Mack?
Just to follow up on that, Councilman Paulson, we were in correspondence with the bidder and received verification today that they don't oppose the awarding of the bid to Gray Construction.
Councilman Paulson?
Can I ask what the difference was in price? Not that that matters now, but
It was about $200,000. Nope. He's shaking his head at me.
It's about 95,000 roughly.
Okay, well, that's better. Sorry.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson, did you wish to pursue that alternate 6 item any further?
I guess I would like to hear feedback from the other council members before going down that road.
City Engineer Peterson, would you discuss alternate 6 just real quick? It's to basically allow vehicles to traverse or park on the synthetic turf area?
It's it's kind of a beefed up section that would be placed on the synthetic turf, and what that would allow would be opportunities for vehicles to travel over it, car shows potentially. Budget wise, we would award all the alternatives. The project total is just over $2.5 million, which is over budget by about $65,000. And then with alternates 1 through 5, which is what was in the motion, we're under budget by about $39,500.
And how much is alternate 6? Okay.
$105,000.
Okay. Councilman Shuddy?
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at the screen here and up there, how big of an area is that? What's the square footage, I guess, or length and width of that turf area, just to give me, or maybe all of us, a better idea on the picture of the potential vehicle parking area?
Justin, this is Lyle with Confluence. Good afternoon, Council, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for jumping in. Just say your full name and recognize you from Confluence. Thank you very much for jumping in.
Yeah, Lyle Pudwell here with Confluence. So the overall square footage on the synthetic turf was just a little over 16,000 square feet. And length and width on that, if you give me just a moment, I can pull that up. So I'll talk just a little bit about the alternate. So that alternate is a rigid panel that basically gets installed below the turf but above the aggregate. In talking with the vendor for the synthetic turf, that panel system can be installed at a later date if the city does see a need to or a desire to have more kind of automotive based type of events out in that space. It is fairly flexible as far as that addition in the future. So that turf panel, this synthetic turf panel, is roughly 189, and I would say the average depth on it from north to south is about 90 feet.
Thank you very much, Lyle. Councilman Danforth had my attention next. Councilman Danforth.
Well, if I may, Mayor, I got really a couple questions. As long as we're on alternate 6, I'll just like to share my thoughts on that. I see this as more of a pedestrian park and not a vehicle type park. I'm not sure where the $105,000 brings us value and to have vehicles that are going to be in there parking. I just don't, I think it obstructs the area that we're in. It can't help with the longevity of the turf. And I'm not sure what small little automobile type event we would have in there that justifies the $105,000. My opinion. Now, if I may, I do have a question in regards to the overall budget, and I'm trying to rely back on my memory, which as I get older isn't all that great. But I believe that before this council convened, I think there was wasn't it a $2 million or $2.5 million budget, and then that got moved up to some numbers approved to, I can't remember what it was, $2.5 million, or I think it was. When we met as a council and we made the decision on the inclusion or exclusion of ICE, it was my understanding that we went from a $2.5 million budget down to $2 million because of the approximate $500,000 for the ICE.
While we're talking about this, I will go. City Manager Mack, would you like to discuss this?
Well, let me ask my question.
I hear you. Yeah.
Now today we're talking about almost 2.6 when we've already thrown the ICE out, which that time as a rough estimate was 2.5. So I'm wondering how we got from 2.5 down to 2, back up to 2.6, and no ICE.
I'll try to muddle through an answer. When we were discussing the ICE, the estimate came in at like 3.1 million with ICE, and that did not include O&M, and it also did not include additional hard costs for the city. So the purchase of the Zamboni, additional space in the ruins, the chiller. So the council at that time decided we're not going to move forward with ICE. Staff took that as that we still have the $3 million budget, and went back and reconvened with Confluence, and that's what we have now, is the 2.6. So they all in with, I think, let me back up a little bit, because this was pre-me. When the decision was made to add the additional $1 million for the ICE, the thought was that it would come in at that kind of $500,000 mark, and that wasn't the case. It was more than that, plus all of the other outside costs that were associated with it. So that's where we landed, to the best of my recollection. You all might remember it differently.
City Engineer Peterson, did you have something to add?
Yes, forgive me, I forgot to add this portion. So the alley, the Schedule B is the alley reconstruction, which comes out of a different pool of money. So the overall project is, yes, almost 2.6 million, but $160,000 of that was budgeted for the alley reconstruction. And actually 130,000 is what the grade construction bid. So that's that would have to be backed off. And so when you're talking about just the park, the park with alternates 1 through 5 is just under 2.5 million. Our understanding as staff was there's a budget of 2 million in the account budget, and then an additional 500,000 from the Watertown Area Community Foundation, and that's where the 2.5 comes from.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Mike. As far as making the plaza area a pedestrian area, I don't know what happens if a car spins its wheels on turf. I don't know how this affects drainage, oil, that would get onto that turf area. I don't think that was ever the intention for that. And I don't see that we need to go with that extra expenditure to allow that. I do have a concern, and that is, again, I've brought this up before. I know we got a few shade structures that we threw in here, but personally, I don't believe that that's going to be sufficient. And I think that needs to be revisited, the shade area on the plaza. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper, did you have something to say still? Okay, Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Like I said, I was just asking about alternative 6 because I do think that there's going to be a lot of unloading, not necessarily parking on it. I think that someone's going to drive on it eventually, and I think it's going to cause damage, and it's going to come at our expense. Even if we try to keep cars off there, they're going to go on there because people, I just think that. But I do think that I personally think that we're making a mistake not putting extracurriculars out here. I don't know if that's big enough for other events, maybe soccer. I don't know, but I think that we are missing out on that. If we're putting a nice park like that, we're putting synthetic turf. That's when we're going to get a lot of people out there, is if we have events out there. And I do think that we are missing out on that. I think we missed out with the ice, at least not even putting something in for the future. If we're building something this nice, it should be all-encompassing, and I think we're missing that boat.
Councilman Tupper?
Anybody can, excuse me, I'll pass.
Councilman Bueller.
Thanks, Mayor. Councilman Paulson, I think you are already probably aware that we do have vendor areas set up in the northwest corner, and they're all accessible for vehicles. Yeah, so I don't know that. I'm not saying that we'd never want a vendor for anything down there. Maybe we would. I don't know, but that was not the intention. We've got areas set up specifically for that operation. Thanks.
Councilman Schutte.
This question, I guess, would be for the gentleman. I forget his name.
Lyle.
Lyle. Yeah, you had mentioned, Lyle, that it's possible to do it later. I know with the ice, there's kind of an expense involved with adding ice later, but just curious what kind of added expense to adding this platform at a later date.
Lyle, are you there and able to answer?
Yes. So my understanding, and I don't have hard costs on a later install, but it would be similar. The aggregate base below the actual turf itself, none of that would need to be regraded or touched. What would happen is they would take the seams out or take the fasteners out on the edges, roll it back, place this reinforced platform system down above it, roll the turf back over the top, restretch, and fasten it. So basically, there'd be a little bit of labor and minor material cost to roll it back, but the platform system itself would not be any additional cost other than inflation that would be associated with that.
Thank you, Lyle.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller.
Yes, to Councilman Schutte's question. One thing that we always have to be cognizant of, too, if we did ice. I mean, we've had this discussion back and forth, and I kind of thought we made the final decision that we weren't going to do it, and we weren't going to put in provisions for it down the road. But, again, this falls on Park and Rec shoulders to have to maintain all this stuff. Canopy structures, that's going to have to be something. All these things that we add, they have to take care of, ice, all those kind of things, and we know where we're at with them as far as personnel goes to date. So, thanks.
Councilman Danforth.
Well, if I look at the drawing that's up on the board now, up on the screen, I see at least 3 shade structures. I'm not sure what the 2 other structures are on there. Where are we driving cars on there? And if and when we do, what happens to all these shade structures and the other structures that are on there? We drive around them?
Is that an actual question or a rhetorical?
That's a question. Oh. Maybe Lyle, if you're there, help.
Lyle?
Yeah, so the posts, the shade structures in the synthetic lawn are all a center post. They're supported by a single post. The 20 by 20 is the size of the canopy on the perimeter edges. So the 2 on the outside have an 8-foot entry height, so it's basically 8 foot from the edge of the canopy down to the turf surface, and the one in the middle is a 10-foot entry height, just to kind of get a little bit more diversity and kind of better visibility from the street side all the way through to the stage. So those posts are fixed onto a concrete footing that would be below grade. So any vehicular traffic, if that were to occur, would need to function and kind of flow in and around the canopies.
One follow-up.
Councilman Danforth, follow-up.
Yeah, Lyle, if I can, on a follow-up on that, where would these vehicles come into this place at? Because on Kemp Avenue, from the drawings we had seen, there was decoration and wall and fence and everything there. So where would these vehicles be coming from in order to park on the turf?
So probably the most logical route would be coming through from the northwest corner up by County Fair, and then traversing kind of diagonally through the plaza, and then exiting down at the southeast. There'd be a wide enough opening down at that location where a vehicle could exit out to Kemp if something needed to come in temporarily. And that's obviously we wouldn't encourage that as a routine activity, but for setup of a special event or something like that, there would be sufficient width to get a vehicle through there.
But there would be on the what I assume is concrete pathways anyway, correct? Without going on the turf, if it was a setup situation?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. What would be the projected completion date on this, assuming we approve it tonight?
I believe we had the completion date was substantially complete October 28th, with 1 month to final completion to kind of finish up any punch list items, and that was 2022.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment. I've supported this project from the beginning at the 2 million figure. I had to take a big gulp when it went to 2.5, potentially 3 million. That caused, I think, quite a few of us in the council at that time some pause, but we went ahead and supported it. I guess I would still support it, but I would like to see us take out that or not include Alternative 6 as part of it. But I'd like to see us approve it and get the job done, have a nice park down there when it's all said and done.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson, I will give you the opportunity to make a motion. No? Okay. Councilman Bueller?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't want to keep beating the drum, but I really do want to revisit the shade. I don't know if there's any type of vertical shade structures that we could put in that could block that sun from the west. I think that's going to be key. I'm not saying these won't work, but I just want to make sure we're maximizing the opportunity to provide as much shade as we can on that courtyard. Thank you.
Councilman Shetty.
I do agree with Councilman Bueller, because some of the feedback I got was just make sure there's enough shade. So if it's worth taking a look at that, I would be for that, whatever that entails.
Lyle, are you still listening to us?
Yes. Yep,
would you care to comment on the shade at all?
So in the event lawn, those three shade structures, one of the challenges, and we've considered it, greatly as we put the plans together, was what day or what time of day that and what time of season that activity was going to occur, because obviously late day, as the sun moves to the west, those shade patterns are going to change. So we do have not only the shade canopies, but the planting plan, Justin, if you go to L101, with the synthetic lawn, we're kind of restricted to kind of doing any plantings outside of it. But we do have some shade trees along Kemp that would provide some coverage in the midday, early afternoon, down on the south there, Justin. Yep, correct. And then on that entry, along that entry, separating basically the playground splash pad from the synthetic lawn, those are some smaller deciduous trees there too that would throw some shade to that entry space, where we've got some seat wall below it, and then would eventually get some coverage to the synthetic lawn as well.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer?
Just a question or a suggestion. Could that be, I hear your concern, Bruce. I don't disagree with it. I don't know the answer. Could that come forward as a change order if we were to get into it, start building it, and realize, hey, maybe we do need some more shade? That could come before us as a change order at that point, couldn't it? And keep the process moving forward in the meantime?
Yes, they are listed as per shade unit, so we could add one or two or whatever we need, I guess.
Yeah,
does that satisfy your concern?
Yeah,
Bruce?
I just want to make sure we've explored all. Sorry, Mayor.
No, Councilman Bueller, that's all right.
I'm out of order. I can't handle it.
But thank you for recognizing.
My wife says that all
Thank
the
you for
time.
recognizing decorum. So,
no, I think it's really, really important because I'm not the thinnest guy in this room, and I've been out there in the sun at these events during the summer. We have the Thursday Night Live, and that shade, if you look, everybody's crowded into the building shade, and they move with the shade. I mean, it's really, really important, I think, for people to be comfortable out there. So I just want to make sure that we explore all the options, all the opportunities. And one thing I'll say, too, and just a thought, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but we have a lot of these type of shade structures because I've been involved with the softball complexes, and we use a lot of the same stuff. In fact, I helped put those things in originally, and so I'm just wondering if it's of benefit to us to standardize these things with the current supplier that we've got for these types of canopies. I don't know if that'd be beneficial or not, but it's something to consider, I think.
any further questions or comments? Councilman Danforth.
So the current motion is to approve as proposed, correct?
Correct.
So if Councilman Vilhauer wants to remove alternate 6, does that?
No, alternate 6 is not in there right now.
Oh, it's not in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Are the other alternates? 1 through 5 are. Okay, good. Thank you.
So the motion is to award the bid for the Watertown Foundation Downtown Plaza. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Yeah, you can clap. But what is this going to be named? And we will attack that at our next item, which is E, the approval of naming rights agreement for Watertown Area Community Foundation Plaza and authorization for the city manager to execute any documents memorializing the grant. For more information, we'll go to our city attorney, Matt Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. As everyone should recall the Community Foundation, I believe it's been a year or two now, announced a contribution to the park of $500,000 to be paid over the course of 10 years in exchange for the naming rights to the park. And the name chosen is Watertown Area Community Foundation Plaza, formally. And essentially what this does is just memorializes those terms, so there's something on record in the future. It's a perpetual naming right, but you know, if somebody were to come forward at some point in the future, 20 years from now, and offer the city X dollars in exchange for naming rights to the park, that there's a provision in here allowing for a conversation to occur with the community foundation should that occur. But for now, it's a 10 years of $50,000 per year starting this year in exchange for naming rights to the park.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the naming rights agreement. Made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Schutte. Any questions or comments from the council? Councilman Danforth.
In my email to Amanda and Reed and Glenn, and I think Matt and Kristen were copied on that earlier today. The one concern I have in the naming rights agreement really only deals with any secondary type advertising or sponsorships that go in there. This to me reads very, very closely, if not identical, to a previous agreement that we entered into and had a lot of problems with that language. Created some hard feelings actually, and it really made what otherwise should be some very good transactions with very willing businesses and individuals in sponsoring. It made a difficult situation. Ultimately, we got through it. I don't want to see that happen here. And with the language here, I'm not sure what would prevent that same thing happening potentially as what we've seen happen. And that, I'm just saying that's a concern of mine. You know, we can look at the people that are here today or are on the community foundation as employees or on their board, and we may all agree what it is today. But that changes tomorrow. And then what's the understanding of the agreement? So I'm just saying that portion of the agreement I'm uncomfortable with only because of the vagueness of it. There's a word in there that's used, reasonable, and that's what's gotten us into trouble before, because that's not a defined term. So it's just my 2 cents in regards to the agreement. Otherwise, it's a great thing, and to have their support, the Community Foundation, I think it's a wonderful thing. But I just wish we could clarify that part of the agreement more than where it is today.
Thank you. And I know that I have been approached by at least 2 organizations that would like to, you know, donate some money to help construct a band shell or something like that. But obviously they like having their names there. So City Attorney Roby, would you mind giving us your analysis on this?
Sure, Mayor, thank you. Councilman Danforth. I guess 2 things. One, this was not something that Jan explicitly or the organization itself explicitly requested, and so that the conversation about the relationship there wasn't really fully fleshed out. This is frankly some pretty typical language you'd see in a naming rights agreement. You know, there was some additional language in the agreement you're referencing that caused some additional problems, but I could see your point, and so to that end, if you want me to bring back a revised version and approve it at the next meeting, I think that's doable.
As we have representatives here from the Community Foundation, Jan DeBerg, the director, and Joel Volkrat, the board president, would either of you like to come forward and, no? I just wondering if you have an opinion on this that you'd like to share with the council. Please just identify yourself for the...
I'm Jan DeBerg. I'm the Executive Director of the Watertown Area Community Foundation. I don't know what you would like me to clarify.
I think, does the Community Foundation, I mean, they want the name of the plaza.
Yes.
Foundation Plaza. Do you have opposition to an organization that wants to pay for a band shell and put their, name on the band shell, or shade structures for that matter? Or
No, we do not.
Okay. Councilman Danforth?
The last thing we want, and we don't want this to look like a giant commercial when we go in there, but there is the gentleman that we worked with in coming up with the plan for the other facility. He said, sometimes less is more, and he's correct, and that is, you can just get too much, and then all of a sudden you lose the perspective of the value of the sponsorship naming and the advertising or whatever might be there. So we don't want it to be that. But we want to take advantage where we know, because we're responsible for this park in every aspect now, we want to be able to take advantage of respectfully and mindfully allowing other advertisers or sponsors within the park so that we can fund the park appropriately. And Jan, where this is coming from is I would like, instead of it be that I'm not even sure, Matt, exactly what the language is, but the gist of it is that it's allowed, can't be denied if it's reasonable, something like that, right? I think we just need to be able to work when we have our opportunities and say what we'd like to do and try to sell it. But push come to shove, when it's all said and done, I think we have to do what we have to do in order to be able to operate our facilities, in this case, the park.
Mayor, if I might.
Yes, and Director DeBerg, I just want to make sure that it's not, we're just trying to clarify it so that we don't have any problem going forward.
I understand that.
City Attorney Roby?
Thank you. In looking closer at the language here, one thing that is different about this in relation to the previous concerning agreement you're referencing, so it talks about approvals shall not be unreasonably withheld, delayed, or conditioned. Those approvals are actually just referencing where the parties have to mutually agree the location of their signage, not others' signage. So the only mutual agreement that needs to occur with the community foundation is where's the sign going to go that says Watertown Area Community Foundation Plaza. Otherwise, they just our only restriction under this agreement is a reputable organization, and that the community foundation still has dominant and prominent signage. But no further approvals are necessary from their organization, like what kind of led to some uncomfortable situations in the past.
If that's the way it reads, then it sounds like we're okay. I didn't read it that way, but we're okay then if that's in fact how it's reading.
Councilman, go ahead. Did you have anything to add?
I was just going to add, and I can, there's no reason that the council can't approve this tonight as in general concept, and I can add a tweak to the language to clarify, and we wouldn't have to bring this forward again, just to make sure it's clear the council's intention based on this conversation.
Councilman Vilhauer.
I was right in the middle of the whole discussion that Councilman Danforth is referring to, and you're right, I don't want to see that happen again with this one. The only concern that I've got, and maybe you could tweak this, is if you're going to do a little bit of tweaking, Matt, the only thing that I've got a little bit of problem is it says only to reputable organizations. Okay, we don't define reputable, and we don't say who makes that determination. I guess to me, I'd like it to read reputable organizations as determined by us, the city. So I guess there's no objections relative to the community foundation. I mean, if you could tweak, if you're going to do a little tweaking anyway, Matt, that would be my 2 cents worth as far as a minor change to this.
Something we should just change here. Okay. City Attorney Roby, is this something that we should change during the proceedings?
Well, I think in order to expedite this, as long as we put on the record what the council is approving the contract as a whole, with the exception of what Councilman Vilhauer just stated, that the reputable organizations as determined by the city, and two, some language clarifying that no additional approvals will be necessary going forward for secondary partners at the park. And if those two things that we've now put on the record for this meeting, I can add that language into the contract and we can move forward.
Director DeBerg, are you comfortable with?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to give you the opportunity while the news is here, and since this will be in the news tomorrow, would you please inform the community of Watertown how you would like this, because the words downtown park should not be heard anymore.
You know what?
It should be
is
called
a downtown park. It is a downtown park.
Well, Foundation Plaza.
We have asked that it be named, well, Watertown Area Community Foundation Plaza, thinking that it will go forward as Foundation Plaza, much like Foundation Fields.
Oh, sure.
Perfect. So that's Steve in the back of the room. You know what the headline is going to be tomorrow. All right. Just wanted to make that clear for the community because I know that was a big thing. So,
thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the council?
Just a
Councilman Vilhauer.
big thank you to Jan and board members that have supported this from the get-go, even before we were totally on board with it.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank
With that,
you
the
all.
motion is to approve the naming rights agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item F is a second reading of Ordinance 21-45 Supplemental Appropriations and Automatic Supplements. For more information, we'll go to our Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien.
Thank you, Mayor. Before the council tonight is the second reading of Ordinance 2145. This will supplement the 2021 budget. There's no changes other than the addition of the $26,500 that was discussed at the first reading. It just wasn't incorporated into here. So if there's no questions from the council, this will just give us the proper budget authority for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair needs to entertain a motion for the approval of this ordinance. Moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any questions or comments on this? Any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Motion is to approve the ordinance 21-45. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item G is an approval of Resolution 21-52, establishing fees for city licenses, permits, administration, and other miscellaneous items. For more information, going back to our Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien.
Thank you, Mayor. Each year, the Finance Department requests that all departments within the city look at their fee resolution and determine if there needs to be any increases or changes. Attached to the agenda, I did do an illustrative version of the fee resolution as well as what the final will look like. The illustration version did show any changes that happen. I'm probably not going to go through the list of all of them. So if there's any questions, we can discuss and talk about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair will entertain a motion for the approval of this resolution. Made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any questions or comments, Council? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just have a question on the city auditorium fees. How much is the auditorium being used at this time, and how are we justifying? I want to know how much it's being used before I ask a question.
It's a legit question. Does anyone have an answer? Our Park and Rec Director, Terry Kelly, is in the back of the room. So I'll introduce you. Parks and Rec Director, Terry Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, Councilor, the Park and Rec, the city itself does little. This probably became really a rental facility for the city. The school is currently under agreement for the gymnasium area. It's now their gymnastics, basically dedicated space. Our old offices are now leased to the county. The welfare office, the Department of Veterans Affairs are in there. So really, we use the basement a little for some rentals. That would really, but since we got the wellness center, the need has really declined. So, basically we rented enough to pay the operational cost. So as a city, I'd say 10% of the use. If that helps answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Because that's, I guess my question was, how are we justifying that if we're not, I mean, if we're not making money on this, I mean, or if it's not being used because the current rates are too high, it just seems like an outdated building that sits empty. But if you're saying it's being used, and I guess I did realize there was some rentals on the business side, but I just specifically the gym. But other than that,
Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
And part of that rental rate per hour is how we establish those lease agreements. So that's why we establish a per base. We take the usage by the organizational group, do the mathematics. So we still define an hourly use, even though you may not come and rent it for a basketball practice. It gives us a basis for developing costs. So thank you.
Chair has a question before I go to Councilman Vilhauer. I want some clarification from our city attorney, Matt Roby, in regards to if the city council even has the ability to oversee parks and recreation fees, because Park and Rec has their own board, they set their own fees, and this is a Park and Rec decision. So not that this, I mean, this is a very legitimate question from Councilman Paulson, but before we discuss this further, to no effect, I guess we should find that out.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, as the park board is currently structured, the park board has the final say on park related fees.
With that, Finance Officer Bob Zine.
Thank you, Mayor. I will like to point out too, in the resolution before the Park and Rec as well as the airport fees, it does spell out that this is information purposes only, just because both of those boards are, they establish the current fees, so.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to be second guessing what staff has brought before us for ratification, but this is something that is looked at on an annual basis, correct? I'm guessing we do get some, we do pay attention somewhat what other communities of similar size are also charging. One thing that I did notice, I guess I'll ask, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if I look at the equipment that we lease out, by the street department leases out, I'm not sure how often that happens. It seems like the rates that we're charging are a lot less than what we have to pay to our independent contractors when we rent their equipment. So I have no idea if I'm right in saying that or not, but it seems like we're not keeping pace with what we're being charged when we rent from independent contractors. Just a comment or an observation. I might be totally wrong in that, but that did cross my mind.
Chris?
Right, I understand that. But we've also seen those per hour rates come before us at the independent contractors charges, and I don't think we're charging commensurate amounts, but I might be wrong in that.
Finance Officer Bob Zine, do you have any comment on that?
I guess the only thing that I will add is Rob did not make any changes this year. The street charges actually weren't put in very many years ago. And I will say that this very rarely happens. So I would say that maybe this year he just passed on it and then maybe next year. But very rarely do we ever, maybe a little bit with the street sweeper if somebody wants their private parking lot or something cleaned up, but very minimal use.
Thank you. That would have been my guess as well. So thanks for clarifying that, Kristen.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilman Schutte?
Sure. Thank you, Mary. And maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but I noticed on the season pass for golf, it was $495,000, 550 cents. So I just was wondering, is that, are we upping our fees quite a bit? And that maybe a little too much. I'm just kind of putting my 2 cents or more.
Again, I think that would be a Park and Rec decision, but would
there's a fair amount of, I noticed a few different ones in that area. I was like, okay.
Councilman Bueller?
No, all I'll say is the Park and Rec Board vetted all of these changes in fees. So we did take a close look at that. Thanks.
Councilman Danforth.
This is just a question for our consideration and probably something that comes after the first year when we do go through our strategic planning, which I am very excited for us to go through. I think it's going to be an awesome thing. But this board, this body is tasked with setting the budget for our city for the year. And the question I have is when we have a secondary board, like I'm going to use Park and Rec as an example, what direction are they given in regards to the Park and Rec assets as to how they should perform? Meaning financially perform as it relates to us establishing a city budget. I've been on the council for 8 years prior to coming on again and never had that discussion. I didn't know that they were actually the ones that said it. It was always my impression that it was a recommendation. And then ultimately we either said yay or nay. But in general, like if I'm on that board and I'm not a part of the big budget question, what direction have I been given as to, do these things have to pay for themselves, or they got to kind of pay for themselves or not pay for themselves, or where do we go? Park and Rec is our largest budget area with the city. So fees and the things that go into there, to me, that's very important. So that's just an observation because I wasn't aware of that after 8 years. So I think that is something that does need to get looked at. It needs to be a recommendation and not an absolute, in my opinion.
Our Park and Rec director, Terry Kelly, did not want to touch the golf course fees, but this one he wants to talk about. So,
May I, Chair?
Yes, please.
Just to Councilman Danforth's question, how I operate as a department head as far as funds, we are allocated the budget approved by this governing body. Our requirement of spending is to stay within that allocation. Anytime that we exceed it or propose to exceed it, that is strictly a governing body decision. I have to come to you for supplemental funds or approval of any purchase of procurement value or current bid law. So we've always been tasked that the governing body has said, here's your allocated funds across the department. So our board has always just approved those funds and that spending as long as we're within the allocation. They are in no way tasked or charged or have the ability to spend beyond those funds. Those have to be first, I would meet with Chris, and then it would come before this body for approval of any excess dollars that were allocated. Whether that's right or I just wanted to clarify how we look at that budget and do spending.
Finance Officer Bob Zine.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the fee structure that Councilman Danforth is speaking of, during the budget process, I do work with the departments that are Park and Rec, Airport. We did run into one with the Wellness Center where some of the expenditures went up, and the conversation had to be had with the city manager, myself, and the department head as, what do those fees look like? And I think then Terry brings those back to the board. So some of this is discussed during the budget process when we start to see what those expenditures look like. Then we have to kind of determine what do the fees need to be as far as the structure with the transfer in from the general fund that the Park and Rec does receive. So as much as I do understand that the council doesn't actually take action, just for informational purposes, there are conversations happening on the backside between the department and finance and now the city manager. So.
Thank you. And I'd just like to comment, Councilman Danforth, that I agree with you. It's one of the reasons why when I came on as mayor, I wanted to look further into the committees and boards in this city. Just not assuming that something needs to be changed, but doing a deeper dive and understanding how all of it works together, because there obviously are some questions about this and how it could be done, possibly better, possibly not. Again, no preconceptions, but definitely want to look at it more. Any further questions or comments on this? Hearing none, the motion is to approve Resolution 21-52. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item H is a presentation, review, and public input on proposed capital improvement plan. And for this, we will go to our finance officer, Kristen Bobzine.
Thank you, Mayor. Before the council is the 5-year long-term capital improvement plan. The very first part of it does kind of give a short summary of the expenditures over the next 5 years. as well as where those revenue sources will come from. Starting at page 6, you'll start to see the detail per department. And then I would like to point out that this year we did add on page 32, it started kind of more for review purposes, a breakdown of what the approved 2022 capital items are. So instead of going probably through this piece by piece, I think we can have any questions, an open conversation, answer any questions. I know that some of the departments are here as well. So thank you.
Thank you. The chair needs a motion for the council to discuss this, so we will accept, I guess the motion would be to accept the capital improvement plan as proposed, made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Open it up for questions or comments. Councilman Danforth.
Before I get into the detail, Kristen, on the, first of all, I looked through this, and the changes that we made to this process probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I think have been really, really good. And that's the map out replacement of primary equipment within our departments. That's made, I think, life a lot better for us. So that's a real positive thing. And as I've went through here today, they pretty much speak for themselves for the most part. Most of that does. But a question I have is in regards to the capital projects that we have. And there's, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 of them that are listed on there. As those are listed on there, and those are pegged out from 22, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, 23 to 27, what do you, through your process, do you remove funds on an annual basis in preparation for those as it's noted on this plan? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So yes, there's a little bit, it's kind of a mixed part. If it's a larger, say, building project, I will not probably be holding any funds back for that, because with the current cost of a new building or something, that's probably going to be a bonding aspect, so I don't want to hold back cash. But the city of Watertown does have what we call a capital outlay accumulation process. So what that does is, based off of when this is approved, I take, a good example is in the street department. A big loader that's worth $350,000, $400,000 over the 5 years, I'm taking cash and I'm restricting that. Not full restriction, but I'm setting it aside. It's the kind of the cash balance. So the goal is that we do want this capital improvement plan to stay as consistent as possible, because what that allows us to do is to be able to buy these bigger pieces of equipment and do these bigger projects as they come up. So yes, the city of Watertown does have a capital outlay accumulation plan. And when you look at the budget, if you actually look at the budget ordinance, when you look, there's a line and it'll say capital outlay accumulation. That's how much I've set aside for each fund. And that is to fund these future items. Did that answer the question? Okay.
Councilman Tupper?
I'll try to battle through this, keep my voice a little bit. I would like to really revisit the third fire station being pushed back to 27. I've asked Chief Rowland to bring us some information. So,
Our Watertown Fire Department Chief, Don Rowland.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman Tupper. I would like to just share just briefly a couple numbers as far as what we currently have at Station 1, Station 2 right now. When it comes to the ambulance calls that we currently have in our department, I'll just give you a breakdown of 2018 through 2021 as of right now. Basically, we started in 2018 with 2,674 calls, and projecting into December 31st of this year, we'll probably be at 2,943, with an increase of about 9.2%. Previous 2 years before that, we were pushing about 19% call volume increase. And how that breaks down in a nutshell, in 2021 here, if we would have 3 stations, Station 1 would have 1,500 of those calls, 1,570 of those calls. Station 2 would be 516. And if we actually had a Station 3, we'd have 855 calls coming out of that station right now. In a nutshell, about 29% of all the ambulance calls that would be coming out of the east end of the town would be at Station 3. So historically, where we were at in 2014, we went ahead and put Station 3 in the capital outlay long-term plan. And I believe that was Mayor Thorson that put that in. And it went in 2021 as one of our markers, so to speak. And in 2018, I believe Mayor Karen moved it to 2023. And a lot of it's based on what everybody's concern is, operational staffing and the cost that it's going to endure. And here's my perspective. I think 2027 might be a little long as far as putting it out there for a marker. I understand the need to put it out there that far because of the personnel staffing. But I think council members in general, all the years we've had our staffing plans, as well as some of our SWOT analysis in 2013, Councilman Danforth was on that with us. 2018 is when we had our last one. We're going to get ready for another one as well. We shared the need of that East Fire Station based on call volume, based on delayed response times. And I've did many presentations over the last couple of years, probably to bore some of you up here, but I think those of you that have been on the council know the need for that, not only from yourselves, but also the community in general. So our response times to the east and southeast part of the city is pushing that 10 to 12 minutes. And like I said, the call volume continues to increase by 4 or 5% annually in that area as well. So I guess where I would go, or I'd like to see it at, is maybe 2025 range, but ultimately that's something that Amanda, city manager Mac, and the rest of the council has to come up with a decision on.
Thank you, and that actually provides a good segue. City Manager Mack did want to comment on this as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to provide a little additional information as we were putting the CIP together. It's been my experience with these types of plans and projects that it's far easier to move a project up than it is to move it back. And looking at a 2023 or 2024 East Fire Station just simply isn't feasible given the operations that it requires. We could probably build the actual building today if we wanted to, but to staff it is problematic. So it was my decision to move it back to 27 with the goal that as we went through our strategic plan, everything comes back to the strategic plan, we would have a better idea of how we can staff that facility and move it up if we needed to. That was the justification for moving it to 27. It's obviously your plan to approve, and as staff will implement, whatever decision you make.
Thank you. Councilman Villauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a question for you, Chief Rowland, and you probably don't have the answer now, but maybe it's something that you can mull over and, get us some information. I know I've heard you and your predecessor give a report in the past, and your reference is ISO, what am I trying to say? The rating.
The ISO 2 is an insurance service organization.
Okay, we've got the 2. We were able to get the 2 a few years ago, but I've also heard you say that if we don't get that third fire station, at some point in the near future, we'll probably lose that 2 rating, go back down to a 3.
That's correct. We're currently in ISO 2. We have a score of 81.99. And when we got the 81.99, we were kind of on the low end as far as company deployment as well as company personnel. And those scores are going to continue to come down as the city grows to the east and northeast as well.
I'm sorry. How often is that rating looked at?
Every 5 years.
So when was the last rating done?
2018.
So we're coming up now in a couple of years again.
Yep. Well, in 2023 we'll have the next one.
Do you have, because I know that affects homeowners' insurance rates.
Correct. I don't have exactly the number, but I can tell you that commercial insurance rates have a better reflection from the ISO than the residential folks. It can be anywhere from 5 to 10% is what insurance advisors have told me.
Have you ever pushed a pencil as far as across the community what that difference in rates would potentially be? I mean, maybe we're concerned about staffing levels or cost for staffing, but if we spread that out across the community, what would it cost the community if we were to lose that rating? That's, again, I don't expect an answer tonight. That's something that I would like to have you consider, Don, and maybe get us a little feedback on some point down the road, if and when we look at this again.
Okay, I can get that for you.
Thank you.
Councilman Beeler.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, you and I had a brief discussion this week, and I just want to throw this out there again. And this would be a short-term and interim, potentially a solution to at least the ambulance side of this thing. You know, the possibility of, I think an ambulance would require, I'm assuming, a two-person crew.
That's correct, two
In the
paramedics.
interim, prior to us being able to build this structure, and I don't disagree we need it. I certainly think we do, but you know, potentially leasing a facility in that neighborhood or building a short-term, constructing something that we could use for just the ambulance side of this thing in the interim. Just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper.
I got an answer to Glenn's question. I reached out today. It'd be about 7 to 10% increase in insurance if we went to a ISO 3.
And I guess, appreciate that, Randy. I'm not sure what that means on a cumulative basis, though, across the community is what I'm trying to get a handle on.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Danforth.
Really not specific to the East Fire Station, although I will say this, I think it's very important for our community. I have for a long time. And, you know, I think it's one thing for a house to burn down, which is a terrible thing. But the worst thing, in my opinion, is the loss of life. And the loss of life we deal with potentially every day when it comes to ambulance calls. Ideally, we can come up with something that helps our community from both aspects. But the priority in my mind between those two is ambulance service. And so, and because I live way up there, shortness is good when it comes to ambulance service. So, and I see you guys come down 19th all the time. But not speaking specifically to the East Fire Station, the one thing I see when it comes to these capital projects like this is I would prefer that that what's on there we know has been vetted at least to enough to know that it's probably going to happen at some point. We don't know when, but it's probably going to happen. We know it. You know, we know an East Fire Station is going to happen. We don't know when that's going to be. So that's a great project to have on this list. I'm going to go right to it, the phosphorus removal facility. I think that should be removed from this list today. I believe we don't know if that's ever going to be done. We don't know. It has to be part of a bigger Lake Kempesca project and solution if it ever happens. That's the only one I look at on here that I really can't tell you that it's ever going to happen. All the other items I can say at some point it's going to happen. Now the priority of these things, we can argue that left and right. And again, I want to go back to it. I think once we go after the first of the year and we have time, that we sit down and we go through our strategic planning, we're going to have conversations about what's important to us going forward and what that priority is. And so next year when we sit down to do this, we should have a very clear understanding of what's been vetted, its importance to us, and where it fits in that importance for priority. So today, I have no problem with what's on here. I'm not really even concerned about the time frame for those today, because I'm not sure that it really matters today. I think things could change, but the only thing, if we approve this today, I believe that the phosphorus removal system should be removed, everything else stay intact, and then when we get into strategic planning, which is what we had all hoped that we as council members would have more time to do, is to plan, and that's why one of our justifications going with the city manager form of government and the mayors we've got it. I think we're going to have more time to have good, open discussions about this thing and talk about their priorities. So today I wouldn't get too hung up on the priority as much as I would what's on the list. I think that's what's really important. And if we approve this, I'd like to see the phosphorus removed. So.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have had a couple conversations about the lake too. I do agree with Councilman Danforth on removing this from the long-term plan right now. My conversations are with the emergence of our zebra mussels. We don't have a good handle on the nutrients in the lake anymore anyway, or the chemicals in there. So I don't think that putting that in a long-term until we get a handle on the zebra mussels is going to be beneficial for our lake anyway. So,
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with most of what Councilman Danforth said. However, if we're going to be looking at a strategic plan anywhere in the near future, I would like to see us keep this as is, take a deeper dive at it then when that time comes. The reason I'm saying that is, were that phosphorus removal facility to come before us for a vote, I'm not quite sure myself where I would vote on that. However, I have sat through, I believe, 4 different presentations concerning this, and the science behind this is valid. And the lakes that have utilized this, they have shown appreciable benefits from this. Lake Compesca Water Project District is very excited about this potential project. The zebra mussels does add a new twist to it. I will agree with that. I think one of the biggest unknowns is will this be effective if we can control the runoff coming into the lake, which, yes, that to me is a big unknown. What are the O&M costs going to be? Never got a firm answer on that. But I don't want to see it taken out. Couple of reasons is, with all the dollars that are being thrown around out there, including water projects, that I'd hate to see us not have a chance to follow up on possible funding for a project such as this. And also my concern is that if I hear what you're saying, Mike, but my concern is we take it out now, it's gone. It's not going to come back. And that's why I'd like to see us keep it in there. We've pushed it back to 2027. Let's take a deeper dive and look at it when we have our strategic plan, or when we review this again next year. But I hate to see it come out now because, and this is part of the Lake Compesca Water Project, or the master plan for the lake. I believe this was a recommendation that came out of that process as well, which we did a couple years ago. So for those reasons, I'd like to see us keep it in there because we take it out, it's never going to come back.
Councilman Shetty.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just per this discussion, that was my question. Was either way in the discussion here is, does it take it off the radar if it were to be off this agenda, or I guess that was my question, was what does that do for keeping it? I would like to see it kept on the radar. So if that means keeping it on the agenda, then I would be for that, unless there's more to that question. Thank you.
Councilman Tupper?
I would mirror exactly what Glenn said, and what Councilman Shetty also said. It's been in the plans for a while. It's easier down the road to take it off than it is to just get rid of it now. You get rid of it now, you start all over again. If it ever comes up, I would like to see it kept on there. So,
our Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, would like to say something.
Thank you, Mayor. As this is the council and the manager's working capital improvement plan, the one suggestion that I could make is the 5 years is the basis that I use for the capital outlay accumulation. I can always add a column in that says and beyond. So that is another thing that if the council would, so that something doesn't ever lose its conversation point or it stays on the radar, I can put in another column that pushes it out, but it doesn't necessarily get incorporated into the 5-year plan. So,
City Manager Mack.
To echo Finance Officer Bobzien, you are seeing communities moving to a 10-year capital plan so that they can look at these big picture things so that they're always on the horizon and start identifying funding sources for that. That could be something that we look at. The other thing, and I just made a note, since I'm still relatively new, it might be helpful to do the CIP presentation prior to approving the budget. So changing the process a little bit so that we have these discussions as we're talking about the budget, not after the budget's already been approved and we've forgotten what was in there. So just something to think about as we go through our planning processes over the next several months. That might help us wrap our heads around some of these bigger projects a little better.
The chair would even like to say that I think it would be a good idea for Watertown, especially in this new form of government, if we even revisit what the capital improvement plan is. I mean, is it an action plan or is it a wish list? Because how you approach that would change your priorities and how you're looking at it. Because a wish list is something like, we would like this to happen someday, we think it has merit. An action plan is, we are going to do this and it's going to happen in this number of years. So I think just even having that understanding would be a good idea moving forward for this community. Councilman Danforth.
Mayor, I agree with you on that. And I look at it from a management standpoint, and that's what we are as council members. We're legislative and we're budgetary. That's our responsibility. So I look at a 5-year plan. That's not very far. In the course of business, or certainly running in a city's governmental affairs here, 5 years is not very far. Because if you back up from the 5-year period, you really should be starting your planning, whether that's land acquisition or architectural work, a year to 2 years prior to that, if you're going to actually build it in 2027. So that's not very far away for us. If I look at our 5-year plan, I look at it and I say, we should be looking and committing to these things. And if we don't think that we really are going to do a golf course clubhouse replacement in 5 years, but we think we know someday we're going to, then I like Kristen's idea about the other column. Because if I'm Amanda, or if I'm Kristen, or if I'm the mayor, I want to say this is what we're committing to here for the most part, knowing that you're going to have exception. That should be a management tool. It's not a wish list.
If I may, Mayor, one of the I'm sorry.
City Manager Mack.
One of the benefits, though, of having that 5th year and beyond is that sometimes, especially like we're seeing now with all of this additional funding coming at us, you can maneuver, right? So we have this thing in year 5, but oh my goodness, they're doing grants for fire stations. So we can move it up and we can utilize, the tools in front of us. That's why, it's not a wish list. It really is a path to where we want to be, but we as management, as elected officials, also have to be nimble with it. It should be sort of a living, breathing document. And if we don't accomplish everything in year 1, well, there's a reason for it, not just because we didn't do it. So,
Councilman Vilhauer.
I was just going to say, I'm okay with what you're suggesting, Kristen. In fact, as I recall, we used to have a and beyond column in the CIP booklet in years past. The last few years we have not, but I know there used to be a and beyond. So I'm all in favor of if we want to do that for some of these projects, whether we do it this year or next year, whatever. But I hate to see it, removed completely tonight.
Councilman Tupper.
When was the ice arena first put on the CIP?
I can't say because I don't know, but I would guess.
It's been a dream
I would guess
for 20.
At least 10 years ago.
So it's wants and needs. We've wanted one for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Buehler?
Thank you, Mayor. I just think moving forward, I think we need to have, I guess, a greater amount of confidence in these projects that they really will occur. And I'm not just going to pick on the lake facility, the phosphorus plant, but I think that there are a lot of unanswered questions for that one. And I think we need to get to at least maybe an 80% level of confidence that this is a project that we want to pursue. And I will just, in my opinion, from the information that I've received to date, in the meetings that I've attended, I don't think that there are enough questions that have been answered for me to vote to do that. moving forward. Not to say that we shouldn't have it, not to say that it wouldn't be a good thing in the future, but I think it's the philosophy, how we do this, how we set these things out in the 5 years in our budget. Because it has a huge effect on how we set monies aside for other things. And so that, to me, you can't just have a project come up that, you know, so-and-so wants this, these guys want it, they think it's a great thing. We need to, as a council, make sure we understand all the facts before we plunk it into the budget. Thanks.
Finance Officer Bob Zine.
Thank you, Mayor. The one piece too that I think sometimes where the long-term capital plan gets a little bit lost, I want to say kind of even almost sometimes forgotten, and then it kind of jumps back out at us. I think one of the goals that the council, mayor, city manager should look towards is we currently do a long-term capital plan. I think really it probably should have to become a long-term plan, not just for the capital, but for the operating. I know Councilman Danforth has said it, Councilman Vilhauer, Bueller, we've all mentioned it before that we plan these capital projects and then we forget the operating piece. I think the big plan that should be, that we look to do is not only is it what are we gonna build, but how are we gonna operate it? Because that's the other piece that there again falls in is you've got your general fund trying to support everything that your capital improvement fund just agreed to do. So it's kind of, I think in the long range, it shouldn't just be our capital plan, it should be our plan. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Danforth?
Mayor, I'm not sure where we sit with everybody that has a vote on this in regards to, if we stay the course as it is today, 23 through 27, and that's the way we stay, I would like to see us remove the phosphorus. If we're going to add that 6 years beyond column just to make sure something stays on the board, I'm okay with that. But a vote from my standpoint today to keep it on is going to be predicated on that other column being added. And then, I'll be honest with you, I still think what Councilman Bueller just said is, I think it's important that these things have a highest level of probability and that we've already done it. Time again, what I hear is that's got to get done. We've kicked that can down the road so many times. It's been on the capital improvement plan for 10 years, so we need to get it done. It's their time. That's not what that plan is all about, gee, now it's somebody's time. The other thing is, and Kristen, what you just said is very, very important to me, is we need to understand the operational side of things. We just heard from our fire chief that we probably can't build a fire station because of our O&M costs. But yet we're going to put $4 million in our currently 5-year plan, and we have no clue, A, if it even is going to work, and B, what it's going to cost us to run it. That doesn't make any sense to me, because if that's the case, we should be doing a fire station. If we're not gonna be sitting here and knowing and having a reasonable understanding of what our O&M costs are, and, you know, Kristen and Mayor and Amanda, maybe that's something that has to be on here is projected O&M costs for anything that goes on here, because that's a big part of what it's easy to build, it's hard to run, right? So where I'm at, I don't know where we're at as a council. So there's one way to find out, and that would be to propose an alternate motion. Because we do not have a motion, we do have a motion to prove as is, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how do I go about making an alternate motion?
You would propose an amendment to strike out the phosphorus plant.
Okay, and I'm doing this just to see where we sit as a council on this, based on where we're at today. So I would like to make the motion to approve it as is with the removal of the phosphorus removal system till such time that it's worthy of being on there, whether that is how we manage our overall CIP plan or with further, I guess, scientific or engineering detail.
The motion is to amend the approval of the CIP to strike out the phosphorus removal plant from the long-term CIP plan. Does it have a second? I'll second. Motion was made and seconded by Councilman Bueller. Discussion upon the motion now. this motion to amend? Any questions or comments on the motion to amend? Councilman Schutte.
So then would that potentially keep it on the radar if we had some sort, wouldn't even have that on the radar for that? I do agree, though, that the facts and data and having everything and the strategic planning that we're going to be doing, you know, in this next year, probably will help us get some of these and hopefully move things forward quicker. I just want to make sure that is something that stays on the radar, whatever that looks like. So,
Councilman Danforth.
The only comment I would have on this item, and I see this item being different than maybe other standalone type of items. This item ultimately at some point is going to be a part of a much larger plan that ultimately comes back to this council. When Mr. Foote was here probably 3-4 years ago, and he talked about the amount of projected phosphorus removal, and I specifically, with this facility, again, it was just a target number, and I asked him if we could measure the phosphorus input on an average spring runoff into the lake. He said, yes, we can get rough numbers. The amount of phosphorus removed by this facility in 1 year was dwarfed by one runoff situation into the lake. One. It would take years and years for that to get caught up. Now, arguably, you could say that it, you know, a little bit helps. But I'm just saying, until we have other items that we take care of, I just don't see this happening. And those items, at some point, if they're going to happen, it might include flood control and whatever it takes, you know. But those things have got to happen in order for this to even be productive for us. And that's going to come in a form of a step 1, 2, 3, 4. And if that's the case, it's going to come back onto our plate if it's worthy. It's not going to go away forever. With this project, I don't see that happening, because I think a bigger plan has got to be put in place, and this would be a part of that.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I guess I would just say this is part of a bigger plan already, Mike, that we have looked at as far as the overall Lake and Pesco master plan. So, I mean, I don't know how, if you've talked to Roger Foote recently or have sat through a presentation on this, but I would disagree with some of what you're saying. But I guess we've debated this to death. You know where I stand on this. You know where Councilman Danforth stands on this. I just don't want to see this go by the wayside, because it does definitely have some merits.
Any Councilman Tupper?
Can I make another amendment?
We can't amend a proposed amendment.
That's why I asked.
If the amendment is passed, then you can amend the amendment,
okay,
or amend the motion again. Yeah. But so we're still discussing only the motion to amend. Chair would like to say something. I am in agreement with Councilman Danforth in a lot of things. The only thing that I would like to ask, there was some discussion as to whether or not we had to pass a capital improvement plan tonight. The indication is by our home rule charter and by South Dakota law we have to. Is that still correct? Is that your interpretation, City Attorney Roby?
Kristen and I put our heads together on this, and I did some research. We are required under our charter to approve an annual plan like this, but it doesn't say, there's no drop dead deadline. So in theory, if you really wanted to, you could wait till the next meeting.
Because, and I was asking that because I do believe we need a more thorough examination of all of these topics and how much they need to, and how much the ongoing costs are, and what's the priority, and also even discussion upon the CIP in general, which is, do we have the 5-year and beyond? Do we have a 5, 10, 15-year category? I think all of these are valuable things, and these are things that the council has been tasked to do more of in this new form of government. I see our finance officer is probably going to disagree with me, but with that said, if we move forward with the CIP as originally stated, with the phosphorus plant in there, I would say that it would be my intention that we meet again as a council soon and do a more thorough examination into this and start looking at it. City Manager Mack, did you wish to speak before your finance officer? City Manager Mack.
Mayor, that is the plan. You know, as we go through our strategic planning process, like we've discussed, the goal is to create these strategic directions. And from the strategic directions is how you build your CIP and how you build your operational plans. So I would encourage us to hold off on scheduling any separate meetings to discuss CIP years 23 through 27 until we've gone through our strategic plan process. Because that'll help really drive, if everybody's on board with East Fire Station, it's going to cost us, X amount of dollars to operate it, then that's staff's direction, and we go and find $600,000 to operate it, or whatever the number is. But to do that, in 2 weeks or, early in January before as a body we've come together and really set what those strategic directions are for the next 3 to 5 years, I think it's premature, and I think we're going to have the same discussion then when we come back to the CIP a year from now. That's just, we take direction from you. So if that's what you want to do, we'll do it. That's just my advice.
Well, and I wasn't saying soon. I was just saying it's sometime before we paint ourselves into a corner next December by not thinking this through.
Yep.
And having it come forward, and still also having the question as to whether or not we even have to do this tonight. The probability is that we probably have to. So, Finance Officer Bob Zine,
Thank you, Mayor. The only piece that I will add, as it's not required by, as Matt and I can't quite, the state law or anything like that, the City of Watertown does put forth their budget book to the GFOA. If we do not have our long-term capital in that book, we will not get the award. So I will add that. So that is a big part of your budget book, which will be due here in about 60 days. So this is what's going to get me to finalize that budget book. So that is the one requirement. So thank you.
Councilman Beeler?
Mayor, I'd like to call the question.
Okay. The motion is to amend the approval of the CIP plan to strike out the phosphorus removal plant from the CIP plan. That is the motion. I'll ask our Finance Officer, Bob Zine, to call the roll. So if you are voting, if you want the phosphorus removal plant removed from the CIP, you vote yes. If you want it to stay in there, vote no.
Okay. Bueller?
Yes.
Danforth? Yes. Helene?
No.
Paulson? Yes. Shetty?
No.
Tupper?
No.
Billhauer?
No.
Okay, so that motion fails.
Motion fails. We are back to discussing the CIP plan as presented. Councilman Tupper.
I would like to make a amended motion to move the fire station up to at least 2025.
Is that, I guess, question for this, is that necessary in the plan? Or, I mean, just change the wording from 2027 to 2025? Okay. So the motion is to amend the CIP plan to change the date of the East Fire Station from 2027 to 2025. Does it have a second? It's moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Conversation upon this amendment. Councilman Danforth?
With where we stand today, without this motion, Randy, I think what's critical today is that we make sure that what we want on here is on here. I think ultimately the date that we prioritize it to, we can say what we want today, but I think it's going to come out of our strategic planning. That's what's really going to set that number, because when we come out of there, I really hope that we do have an operational budget, an estimated operational budget beside each one of these projects. And that's going to help us understand where our priorities are. It'll assist us in that process. I honestly don't think it's necessary to move it today, because I don't think it's going to matter, Andy. If that gets rejected and it just stays out there, if it gets moved, ultimately, our strategic planning process, I think, is going to dictate that. I really do. Just my comments.
Councilman Schutte, did you have anything?
Mike said it better than I could.
Councilman Tupper.
I just think that it is a priority, and by moving it back 2 years, you're moving that priority back no matter if we do a strategic plan or not. That just moves that priority back. So it's not as important while you're doing your strategic plan. That's my opinion.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. We can change the location and the placeholder for this in our next budget cycle. And I agree with that. The strategic plan will give us some of the answers that we need to move forward. You know, we have a lot of things that are unpredictable that come, you know, give you some examples at the airport terminal. You know, we had to decide on funding for that in a very short period of time because of the federal funding that was available to us. The city park, that was another one that popped up. And then the city hall. I mean, some of these things that have come about because that opportunity presented itself at that time, we had to take advantage of that. And so we don't know what that holds. I don't have a problem leaving it there. I think it's a huge priority. I do think that if we can move it up, I'd like to see that. But I'm okay with leaving it where it's at for now.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman
Just
Tupper?
some of the government funding. There may be some grants available to fund 6 employees for up to 3 years, so that would be an option. So,
any further questions or comments on the motion to amend? Seeing none, we will call the roll. The question is to amend the CIP plan to change the date for the East Fire Station from 2027 to 2025. So if you would like to see the date moved up to 2025, you vote yes. If you, for whatever reason, it's not that you hate the East Fire Station or anything like that, if you do not want to see the date changed, you vote no. Yes means move the date up, no means leave it as is. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Bueller. No. Danforth. No. Helene.
No.
Paulson. Schutte.
No.
Tupper.
yes.
Billhauer.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion fails.
Motion fails. We are back to discussion upon the CIP plan as proposed. Councilman Danforth.
I'd like to call a question on that. We've kind of beat this one,
Call
too.
the question, seconded by Councilman Billhauer. All those in favor of the CIP plan as presented, please say aye. Aye. Aye.
Nay.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. Item I is an approval of change order number 3 with Gray Construction for an airport terminal project, number 1927. For more information, we will go to our city engineer, Justin Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. Change order number 3 is a series of changes that have come up over the course of construction at the airport terminal project, totaling $5,702. Some of these changes are grant eligible, so the city share is $12,787.84.
Thank you. Is our airport manager, Todd Cyree, online? No? Okay. With that, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the change order. Made by Councilman Billhauer, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any questions or comments upon this change order? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the change order. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item J is a first reading of Ordinance 21-46, a redrawing of Ward A and Ward C as a result of population changes in the 2020 census. For more information, City Attorney Matt Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. So, the Federal Voting Rights Act, 1965, requires essentially equal representation amongst the electorate as far as the numbers on each ward that can vote on. That will vote on each council seat as well as the at-large district. So, the 2020 census was conducted and revealed that As you probably could have guessed, if you thought about it, Ward A has grown substantially over the last decade, and it's resulted in an imbalance in the number of folks in that ward. And so First District proposed, what you have in front of you is a proposal from First District to bring back into balance the wards, the 5 wards across the city. And essentially, the proposal simply takes a chunk out of Ward A and converts it to Ward C. And I can share my screen here. So as you can see there, it would run from along 3rd Avenue, from 6th Street to 11th Street, and then up to 7th Avenue Northeast. And also on the agenda is a list of property owners that would be affected by this change, and if it does go into effect, I presume we would do some sort of a notification process to let them know that they've been redistricted into Ward C from Ward A.
Thank you very much, Matt. Any questions from the council? Councilman Danforth.
Matt, does that happen automatically? I mean, they'll get notified, but then do they have to go down and make the change themselves, or it automatically happens at the courthouse?
If this change is made, those individuals will become registered in that ward, so that'll be taken care of by the county auditor's office.
Any further questions? Thanks for the information. We'll take that up at the next meeting. Agenda item K is an approval of a purchase agreement of Morris First Edition adjacent to Willow Creek Drive and authorization for the city manager and finance officer to sign documents. We need a motion to approve. Actually, for more information, let's go to Matt Roby first, our city attorney. Oh, Justin. Our city engineer, Justin Peterson.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This triangular piece of property right here by Willow Creek Drive and along Willow Creek is the property that we're discussing. The Morris Family LLC is willing to sell the property to the city for $0. It's located in the floodplain and floodway, and it would be a beneficial part of our floodplain management purpose.
Thank you. Before we have questions or comments, we need a motion from the council. Councilman Paulson, would you like to approve or make a motion to approve this purchase agreement? Moved by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this kind of relates to letters Q and R off the consent agenda. I do think that if there's any required sidewalk in that location, that the city should not be responsible for that, as it directly relates to the agreements made by letters Q and R on the consent agenda. And that is a standard practice for all developers, that any land being conveyed to the city, that they're responsible for sidewalk improvements prior to conveying.
City Engineer Peterson, did you have any comment on that?
This area, I'll just kind of point out that this is 26th Street, I believe, 26th or 28th. And that's where the sidewalk would be. The property that we're talking about is more in the flood area, so there wouldn't be sidewalk in that area unless it ends up being a trail.
Councilman Paulson, are you satisfied with that answer?
Yeah, I guess I didn't know if there was sidewalk along Willow Creek Drive or not. It was just a comment that if there is sidewalk required, that I feel that it would be the owner's responsibility.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the purchase agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item L, we need capital letters here. It always looks like an I to me, sorry. L is an approval of Resolution 21-56, a plat of Mansell Second Edition. We'll go to our Community Development Manager, Stacy Bungard.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. So this is a replat, and it is one parcel currently. And this proposed replat would take this into 5 separate lots. The property is located southeast of Sandy Shore State Park on Lake Compesca and on the south side of South Lake Drive. It is about 8.46 acres in size, and it was annexed and zoned back in 2020, and it is zoned as R1 single family residential. We do not have an associated development agreement with this proposed plat, as there are no outstanding infrastructure improvements that are adjacent to the public right of way. As you can see in the report, we do have lots 1, 3, 4, and 5 of Mansell Second Edition. They will have a cost recovery as Lot 2 is already built upon, and that cost recovery would be for sanitary sewer connections. And with that, the Plan Commission did recommend approval to the City Council December 9th unanimously. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I can pull up an exhibit.
While you are pulling that up, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the plat made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Danforth. So now we can have questions and comments about this. Any questions? Councilman Danforth.
Does the work that's being done here, would that have any impact on the bike trail that will go across there? Or is that all spelled out in the previous platting and the development agreement?
I'm not sure that it would have any impact. Justin is kind of our bike path specialist, though. Okay. Okay. So I was just informed by TK, Park and Rec Director, that all of the parkland was previously already dedicated in the first phase.
It carries over here to this then?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? The motion is to approve the plat. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item M is stricken. Item N is an authorization for the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Intersections Consulting for Strategic Planning, which we've already heard about tonight multiple times. City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. This agreement is with Intersections Consulting. You all may remember John Baranek helped facilitate our staff council workshop all the way back in August, which feels like a lifetime ago already. John has extensive experience in conducting and producing strategic plans for government entities, and he is very excited to get to work with us, and we would tentatively plan to kick this process off the second week of January. I believe it's either the 11th and 12th or 12th and 13th. I'll have to verify for sure with him. If you've looked through the proposal, there's a lot of community engagement components to it. There's multiple opportunities for staff and council to come together, multiple levels of staff to be engaged. And what's unique about this is once we've got the plan and we go kind of through the first quarter, then we come back and do a retooling. So what, does it still make sense? Because what you'll find, as John explained to us last week, is that first quarter we're really gung-ho and aggressive and we throw everything on the wall and we're going to accomplish all of this, and then sometimes we don't. So we got to come back and really decide what the priorities are and how to calendar that out. The other unique thing about this process, as opposed to just having someone create a plan for us, is that we literally put dates and names and times and dollars on a calendar, and here's what we're doing. So everybody's bought in at the same time. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion to authorize the agreement.
So moved.
Made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any questions or comments on this motion? Hearing none, the motion is to authorize the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're on to item H from the consent agenda, which I have to go back to the consent agenda. Let's see. Which is an approval of the certificate of completion for the development improvements for 26th Street Southeast and a portion of 7th Avenue Southeast located in the Morris Addition installed by J&J Earthworks Incorporated and on behalf of the developer Coho and the Morris Family LLC. Do we need more information on this, or do the chair will entertain a motion to approve this? Made by Councilman Villauer, seconded by Councilman Danforth. And Councilman Paulson is recusing himself from this vote?
Yes, I am recusing myself.
And that is the reason why it was pulled. Is there any need for questions or comments from the council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Is there any old business to come before the council? Is there any new business? Councilman Danforth.
More of a question. One thing I have noticed as I travel First Avenue north, I guess, out towards 19th Street, as Willow Creek Drive gets busier and busier and busier, especially there's just certain times of the day that it's extremely busy, it's hard to get a left-hand turn from First Avenue to go north, which is where a majority of that traffic goes, because there's so much traffic coming in from the east on Willow Creek Drive. I don't know how that process works of looking at those things, but if somebody could take a peek at that, I think it'd be helpful. I sat there the other day. There were 15 or 16 cars that crossed, and I was the first one in line coming from the west. There were 15 or 16 cars that had to get across that intersection before I could turn, and then in watching, it was me and two other vehicles is all that made it through that light. So I don't know how that process works or who controls that, but if somebody could at least maybe take a peek at that, Mayor and Amanda.
I was just going to comment the process. So we have an internal working committee. It's public safety, street department, engineering. They look at all of those requests for new signage, traffic signals, things like that. And a lot of it is dictated by the PD and traffic patterns, things like that. And so I saw Chief Toomey taking some notes. So they work up a recommendation and decide, where we put signage. Councilman
Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. To kind of expand on that a little bit, I think 19th Street needs to be looked at a little bit closer. I'm having the same issue every time, especially with the ice arena now going down 3rd. Trying to turn left or right, off of 3rd even, is getting really difficult. The traffic patterns on 19th, it's a noticeable increase, and it's only going to get more, especially with more things going to the east. So I think it is appropriate to take a look at all of 19th along with the Willow Creek Drive aspect of that.
Thank you. Any more new business? Any liaison member reports? Councilman Villauer.
Quick update from the airport board. November, another outstanding month, 2,328 emplanements in November. Year to date, we're at 16,000 through November, 16,225 compared to 2 years ago. We discount last year. 2 years ago, 11,681. Almost 50% above where we were 2 years ago. Now we'll probably hit 18,500 to 19,000 emplanements this year when it's all said and done. Outstanding year. Terminal still on schedule to open late June, early July. Everything's proceeding at the terminal project out there.
Fly ATY. Any other liaison member reports? Any announcements? Have a blessed and safe Merry Christmas to everyone in Watertown. That said, we do have need to go into executive session tonight for contractual reasons. The chair, we do not expect to take any action when we are out of executive session. So, with that said, the chair will entertain a motion to enter into executive session. Made by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Tupper. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you and good night.